The interview was supposed to be the easy part. I had prepared for 3 weeks. I had researched Callaway and Park from every angle I could find. I knew their client list, their campaign history, their positioning strategy, their founding story, the names of their 3 partners. I had a folder on my laptop called CP Interview Prep with 11 subfolders. I was ready, and then the door opened, and I walked in, and the man sitting at the head of the conference table looked up, and I stopped walking. He stopped too. For approximately 4 seconds, neither of us said anything. Then he said, quietly, "You didn't tell me your last name." And I said, "You didn't ask." And the other 2 people at the table looked between us with the expression of people watching something they don't entirely understand. His name was Ethan Park, as in Callaway and Park, as in one of the 3 founding partners of the company I had flown to London to interview with, as in the man I had spent 14 hours on a plane telling absolutely everything to, 4 days ago, because I thought I would never see him again. So, 4 days ago, I almost missed the flight. Not almost in the way people say almost when they mean they were slightly rushed. Almost in the way where I was literally running through O'Hare with my carry-on, bouncing off my hip and my boarding pass pulled up on my phone, and the gate agent was already closing the jetway door when I got there. And she looked at me with the specific expression of someone who has seen this before and is not impressed. I made it. Barely. I found my seat, shoved my bag into the overhead compartment, collapsed into 14C, and sat there breathing for a moment with my eyes closed, thinking, okay, you're on the plane, you're going to London, you're starting over. That was the plan. After 2 years at a Chicago agency that had slowly become the wrong fit, after a relationship that had ended in the specific quiet way, where you realize one day that you've been lonely for months without noticing, after 29 years of building something that looked right from the outside, but felt slightly off from the inside, I had applied for a job in London, gotten an interview, and bought a one-way ticket. The one-way part was perhaps excessive. My mother had said so. My best friend Dana had said so. My therapist had said so. With more professional language. I had bought it anyway. "Excuse me." I opened my eyes. The man standing in the aisle beside me was looking at the seat next to mine, 14B, with the expression of someone doing a quick calculation. "That's my seat," he said. He was tall, dark-haired, maybe early 30s, wearing a navy jacket over a white shirt with the sleeves already pushed up, carrying a laptop bag and looking like someone who had also perhaps rushed to make this flight, but had done it with considerably more composure than I had. I stood up to let him in. He sat down. We did not speak for the first hour, which was fine, which was what I wanted. I put my headphones in. He opened his laptop. We were 2 strangers on a plane, which was the correct and normal state of affairs. And then the turbulence started. I am not afraid of flying. I want to be clear about that. I fly regularly. I understand the physics. I am a rational adult person who knows that turbulence is normal and statistically inconsequential, but this turbulence was significant. The kind where the plane drops suddenly, and your stomach goes with it, and the flight attendants sit down and strap in, and the pilot comes on the back intercom with that specific calm voice that is somehow more alarming than if he'd just said something honest. I gripped the armrest between us, which his hand was also on. We both noticed at the same time. I moved my hand. He moved his. "Sorry," I said. He said. The plane shuddered again. I gripped the armrest again. His hand was still there. Neither of us moved this time. "I'm not afraid of flying," I said out loud to no one in particular. "Me neither," he said, in the tone of someone who was also perhaps slightly afraid of flying. The turbulence lasted 20 minutes. We held the armrest the entire time, hands almost touching, not speaking, looking forward. When it stopped, we both exhaled at the same moment, which was embarrassing, and then we both laughed, which was less embarrassing. "Ethan," he said, holding out his hand. "Mia," I said. We talked for the next 11 hours. Not continuously. There were pauses and a meal, and a period where we both attempted to sleep and neither of us managed it. And somewhere over the Atlantic he watched half a movie while I read. And it was comfortable in the way things are comfortable with strangers on planes, when you both understand that this is a temporary situation with a defined endpoint. But we talked. He asked what I did. I told him marketing, brand strategy, campaigns. He asked what kind. I told him the kind where you try to figure out what a company actually is, underneath what it thinks it is, and then you tell people that thing. He went quiet for a moment. "That's a good way to put it," he said. "What do you do?" I asked. "Something similar," he said, "from the other side." Which I didn't push on, because sometimes on planes you don't push, you just let things be what they are. He asked why London. I told him about Chicago, about the agency, about the slow drift of the last 2 years, about the relationship that had ended quietly in November. I told him about my mother's face when I showed her the one-way ticket. I told him about the folder on my laptop with 11 subfolders. He listened the way some people listen completely, without waiting for his turn. "That's brave," he said, when I finished. "It's possibly reckless," I said. "Those aren't mutually exclusive," he said. I looked at him. "What about you?" I said. "Why London?" "I live there," he said. "I'm from there. Originally. I was in Chicago for a conference." "What kind of conference?" "Marketing," he said, and smiled slightly. "From the other side." Somewhere around hour 9, the cabin lights dimmed and most of the plane went quiet. We didn't. He told me about growing up in London, a house in Islington, a father who'd been an architect, and a mother who'd taught secondary school English and had strong opinions about commas. He told me about moving to the States for university, staying longer than planned, building something he hadn't expected to build. I told him about my grandmother, who had emigrated from Seoul at 23, with one suitcase, and built an entire life in a place she didn't know, and how I'd always thought that was the most frightening and most extraordinary thing I'd ever heard of, and how maybe buying a one-way ticket was my small version of that. He was quiet for a moment. "She sounds remarkable," he said. "She was terrified the whole time," I said. "She told me that once. She said she was terrified every single day for the first 2 years. Did it stop?" She said it got quieter. Not gone, just quieter. He looked at me. "I think that's the best thing I've heard about courage," he said. "That it's not the absence of fear, it's just quieter." I looked out the window at the dark over the Atlantic. "I'm going to think about that for a long time," I said. "Me too," he said. We landed at Heathrow at 6:47 a.m. The plane taxied. People stirred. The overhead compartments opened and closed. We stood in the aisle, waiting to deplane, and there was that specific airport feeling of something ending before you've quite processed that it began. "Good luck with the interview," he said. I had told him about the interview. I had told him about the folder with 11 subfolders. I had told him almost everything, actually, in the way you tell a stranger on a plane almost everything, because they are a stranger, and you will never see them again. "Thank you," I said. "Good luck with whatever the other side is." He smiled. A real one, the kind that made something in his face change. "I didn't ask your last name," he said. "No," I said. "Should I have?" I thought about the armrest. I thought about 11 hours. I thought about courage getting quieter. "Maybe," I said. He looked at me for a moment. And then the line moved, and we moved with it, and he went left through arrivals and I went right, to find my luggage. And that was that. I told myself it was fine. It was a plane. It was 14 hours. It was the kind of thing that happens and then is over. I almost believed it. The interview was at 10 a.m., which gave me enough time to get to my hotel, shower, change into the dress I'd packed specifically for this, drink 1 coffee, review my notes, and tell myself I was ready. I was ready. The Callaway and Park offices were in Fitzrovia, on the 3rd floor of a building with good bones, and the kind of reception area that suggests the people inside know what they're doing. The receptionist offered me water. I took it. I sat in a chair and looked at my notes one more time and thought about my grandmother with her one suitcase and her daily terror. Just quieter. I told myself. The receptionist led me down a hallway to a conference room. I opened the door. I walked in. And Ethan Park looked up from the head of the table. The 4 seconds lasted approximately forever. Then, "You didn't tell me your last name." Then, "You didn't ask." Then, the 2 other people at the table looking between us. One of them was a woman in her 50s, with very short silver hair, and the expression of someone who has seen everything. This, I learned later, was Diana Calloway, the other founding partner. The other was a younger man who looked like he was trying very hard not to smile. "You two know each other?" Diana said. "We were on the same flight," Ethan said. He had recovered, entirely, into the composed professional version of himself. His voice gave nothing away. "From Chicago, 4 days ago. Small world," Diana said, in the tone of someone who finds the world considerably less small than advertised. She looked at me. "Shall we begin?" she said. "I have given better interviews. I want to be honest about that. I am good at interviews. I know how to talk about my work. I know how to make a campaign sound like the right campaign. I know how to be the person they're looking for without pretending to be someone I'm not. But it is difficult to be entirely natural when one of the 3 people interviewing you is someone you spent 14 hours telling everything to on a plane 4 days ago, and who is now sitting across a conference table, looking at you with an expression of complete professional neutrality that, from 14 hours of evidence, is not the only expression he has. I did my best. I talked about the Chen campaign, which had turned around a brand that everyone thought was finished. I talked about my approach to positioning, finding what a company actually is, underneath what it thinks it is. I talked about why London, why now, why Calloway and Park specifically. Diana asked sharp questions. The younger man, whose name was apparently Marcus, asked good ones. Ethan asked one question. He waited until near the end, and then he said quietly, "You mentioned finding what a company actually is underneath what it thinks it is. Can you give us an example of a time that was harder than expected?" I looked at him. He looked back. Nothing in his face. I took a breath, and I told them about the Meridian account. The client who'd hired us to make them look innovative, when what they actually needed was to admit they were traditional and be proud of it. The 6 months of fighting for the honest version. The campaign that almost didn't happen and then did, and performed better than anything they'd run in a decade. I told it the way I'd told things on the plane, without decoration, without strategy, just the true thing. When I finished, Diana was nodding. Ethan said nothing, but something shifted in his expression. Just slightly. The way things shift when something lands the way it was supposed to. They thanked me. They said they'd be in touch. They showed me out. I walked to a coffee shop 2 streets away and sat down and stared at my cup for a long time. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. London area code. I stared at it. I answered. "You still have my one question," said Ethan. I blinked. "Your one question," I said. "On the plane. You asked what I did, and I said something similar from the other side. And you didn't push. You get one question. I owe you that." I looked out the window at the London street, the gray morning, the particular quality of light I was still getting used to. "Are you allowed to call me?" I said. "Is this I recused myself from the hiring decision," he said. "As of 20 minutes ago. Diana is very capable of making it without me." I was quiet for a moment. "That was fast," I said. "I'm precise about things," he said. "When I know what I want." Outside, a bus went past. Red, the way London buses are red, the way some things are exactly what you expect them to be. "Okay," I said. "One question." "Go ahead." "On the plane," I said. "When the turbulence stopped." You laughed. "That's not a question." "I'm getting there." You laughed, and then you told me your name, and I've been thinking about whether you would have said anything at all if the turbulence hadn't happened. Silence for a moment. "No," he said. "I don't think I would have." "Why not?" "Because I'm not someone who talks to strangers on planes," he said. "I work, or I sleep, or I look out the window. I don't dahard." He paused. "I don't tell people things." "You told me things," I said. "Yes," he said. "I did." I waited. "I've been trying to explain that to myself for 4 days," he said, quietly. I haven't managed it. I looked at my coffee cup. I have a theory, I said. Tell me. Turbulence, I said. It reminds you that you're not in control. And when you're not in control, you stop performing and you just are. Whatever you just are it. Silence. That's going to take me a while, he said. Me too, I said. I just thought of it. He met me at the coffee shop 20 minutes later. He ordered tea, because he was apparently that kind of person, and sat across from me in the grey London morning, and we talked for 2 more hours, the way we'd talked on the plane, except this time there was no armrest between us, and no defined endpoint, and the city outside the window was the city I had come to start over in. The one-way ticket, he said. Still one way, I said. Are you frightened? I thought about my grandmother, her suitcase, her daily terror, quieter over time. Yes, I said. But it's getting quieter. He looked at me across the table. I'm glad the turbulence happened, he said. Me too, I said. Even the part where we were both pretending not to be scared. Especially that part, he said, and smiled, and it was the same smile from the plane, the real one that changed his face. Dana called me that evening, from Chicago, which was still yesterday for her. How was the interview? She said. Complicated, I said. Complicated good or complicated bad? I was sitting at the window of my hotel room, looking out at London in the early evening, the particular grey gold of it, the city doing what cities do at dusk. The man I told everything to on the plane, I said. Yes? He was one of the partners. Silence. Mia, Dana said. I know. The man you told everything to. I know. On a 14-hour flight. Dana, I know. And he's a partner at the company you interviewed with. He recused himself from the hiring decision. More silence. Because? Dana said. I looked at London. Because he's precise about things, I said. When he knows what he wants. The longest silence yet. Mia, Dana said, finally. You bought a one-way ticket and flew to London and immediately met someone. I didn't immediately hit S. On the plane, Mia, you met him on the plane. The turbulence helped, I said. Of course it did, she said. And then, quietly, are you happy? I thought about that for a moment. Outside, London was going golden in the last of the evening light. And somewhere across the city, Ethan Park was being precise about things. And I had come here with a one-way ticket and 11 subfolders and my grandmother's example. And the fear was still there, but it was, already, getting quieter. Yes, I said. I think I actually am. I got the job. Diana called me 3 days later, on a Tuesday morning, while I was standing in a Waitrose trying to figure out which oat milk was the right oat milk, because apparently there are 7 kinds, and I had not prepared for this. I stood in the oat milk aisle and listened to her say the words, and said thank you several times, and hung up, and stood there for another moment holding a carton of oat milk and feeling something that was too big for a grocery store. I called my mother first. She cried, which she would deny later. I called Dana second. She said I told you so, which she would not deny. I did not call Ethan because we had exchanged numbers at the coffee shop but had not yet established what the parameters of this were, which was something we were being careful about, which was the right thing to do, which I was finding increasingly difficult. He texted me at 4 p.m. He said, I heard. Congratulations. I said, thank you. How did you hear? He said, Diana mentioned it. She's very pleased. I said, and you? A pause. He said, I recused myself from the hiring decision, not from having an opinion about the outcome. I stared at my phone. I said, that's very precise of you, he said. I told you. I said, you did. Another pause. He said, dinner, Friday, if you want. I looked out the window of my new flat, which I had found 2 days ago, which was small and slightly cold, and had a window that looked out onto a brick wall, and which I loved immediately and completely. I said, yes. Friday was good, better than good. The kind of dinner where you order dessert not because you want dessert, but because you're not ready to stop, and then you walk for an hour afterward because you're still not ready, and the city does what cities do at night when you're paying attention to it. We walked along the river. You're staying, he said. It was not a question. I'm staying, I said. Even without the job, you would have stayed. I thought about it. Yes, I said. I think so. I think I needed to be somewhere that didn't already know the shape of me. He looked at me sideways. I said that to someone once, he said. About London? About Boston, he said. When I came back here, I needed somewhere that didn't hold the shape of who I'd been. I had not known about Boston. There were still things I hadn't known. Things that would come in pieces. The way things come when you're building something carefully. Did it work? I said. It's working, he said, and looked at me when he said it. And I understood that he didn't mean only the city. My grandmother called me the following Sunday. She was 81 and called every Sunday without fail, and every Sunday she asked the same questions in the same order, and I loved her for it. How is London? She said. Cold, I said. Beautiful. Strange. Good. How is the job? I start Monday, I said. How are you? I thought about what to say. I thought about the plane, and the turbulence, and the armrest between us, and 11 hours over the Atlantic, and a conference room where time stopped for 4 seconds, and a coffee shop on a gray morning, and walking along the river at night, while the city moved around us. Terrified, I said, but it's getting quieter. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, in Korean, which she only did when something mattered, good, that means you're in the right place. Outside my window, London was doing what it does on Sunday mornings, gray and slow and somehow exactly right. And I thought, yes, I think maybe I am.